You and I, we are invited to believe things all the time. Think about the invitations to believe that are all around us. Right now, we're being invited to believe things about this virus that's sweeping around our world. And many of them, most of them, make sense and we believe them. And of course, they're backed up by evidence and experts and the testimony or the stories of the people who have experienced this virus. Other things make no sense, though. They have no evidence to support them, and they're frankly crazy. We've seen the government having to respond to fake news about the virus being spread by the 5G phone network. But some people have believed that fake news and ridiculously have set fire to mobile phone masts. Now, it's not just a virus that we're invited to believe things about. If you're in a relationship, a parent-child, a brother-sister, husband-wife, family, partner, if you're in any kind of relationship, you're invited to believe that the other person or the other people in that relationship love you. You choose to believe that they love you based on the evidence of how they treat you, their commitment to you, their faithfulness to you, their words, and so on. Every time we sit down on a chair or a sofa, we're invited to believe that it will support our weight, based on the evidence of the legs, the way it's built, and our previous experience. When we buy a bar of chocolate, we're invited to believe that what is inside the wrapper is what we're told is inside on the outside. And we believe that based on our previous experience of chocolate bars. And some of us have had a lot of previous experience of chocolate bars. We do this all the time. All around us are invitations to believe things. And we often respond to those invitations positively. And when we do, it changes our lives. It's changed us as we've altered our lifestyles to stay shut in during this virus, but hopefully it's kept us safe. It changes our lives when we experience, give, and receive love. It changes our lives a little bit. When we sit comfortably on a chair or a sofa, it brings us some contentment. And when we eat chocolate, it changes us as well, doesn't it? It changes us in lots of ways, maybe bringing us some joy, but maybe also some bigger bellies. Some of the things that we're invited to believe are really important. They're massive, life-changing things, and some are more trivial and don't have such a great impact. Today, I want to humbly suggest that the events of the first Easter 2,000 years ago are things that we're invited to make a decision on believing or not. And the big question that Easter poses to all of us, whether we're Christians, skeptics, explorers, or atheists, is who is Jesus? And what we believe to the answer to that question is changes things and has changed things. In the ancient world, people who believed Jesus was more than just a great teacher changed the laws for the better on how children were treated because of his teachings about the importance and the value of children. Universities such as Cambridge, Oxford, and Harvard were founded by people who followed the teachings of Jesus to love God with all of their mind. Our date system is based around the life, the death, and the resurrection of Jesus. Many of our ethics, laws, and systems of government are influenced by him. The decision about what we believe in answer to the question, who is Jesus, is perhaps the most significant, massive, life-altering, destiny-changing thing we could imagine. Now, you may be skeptical about that last assertion, or indeed about the whole Easter thing, the whole Jesus thing, and that's fine. You may just have wandered across us on YouTube this morning, or someone may have invited you to watch us, or you may just be bored of the shutdown and this feels an hour of your time. I get that. But if you give me a few minutes of your time right now, I'll do my best to unpack the original Easter story in a way that demonstrates why it's potentially so significant. And if you're already there, if you would say, Chris, I've responded to that invitation to believe, I'm there, then please don't switch off. Because I think in these particularly challenging times, it's great to be reminded of why you embraced that belief in the first place, of what you believe, why you believe it, and to embrace it afresh. And so today we look back 2,000 years and we are given an invitation to believe. We've been looking together over these last 5 weeks at some of the critical events from the life of Jesus as recorded for us by someone who was there, an eyewitness to it, a bystander whose name was John. And you can catch up on this series so far by checking out our previous live streams on YouTube or via our podcasts or via our website. But John's passion was to extend an invitation to us to see in our mind's eye what he had seen with his actual eyes, and to extend an invitation with us to believe what he had come to believe. You see, John was a skeptic. It took him some time, and in fact, he didn't really come to believe Jesus was who he said he was until that first Easter Sunday. And he wasn't alone. Most of Jesus' friends and followers were in the same boat. But what convinced John and what convinced the others was what they saw when they met Jesus risen from the dead. And that caused them to respond to the question, who is Jesus? With the answer, the Messiah, the one who saves, the Son of God. It wasn't his teaching that convinced them. It wasn't even all the miracles we've been looking at in this series. It was the resurrection. You see, the story of Jesus isn't worth telling without the resurrection. Without the resurrection, Jesus was just another Jewish rabbi and teacher executed by the Romans, and there were plenty of those. Without the resurrection, Jesus was just another rebel who died on a cross, and there were plenty of those. 70 years before Jesus, 6,000 captured soldiers of the slave rebellion led by Spartacus were crucified on the road to Rome. Why then does history record, and we still talk years later, about the Jewish rabbi Jesus and his crucifixion? Because of what happened 3 days after his death. You see, the story of Jesus isn't worth telling without a resurrection. And we know about his crucifixion and his resurrection because of the eyewitness accounts from people like John. Let's look at what he tells us, starting with Jesus' death. Thank you so much. We're having a few problems with our screen, so they've got me the Bible passages right here. Let's look at what he tells us, starting with Jesus' death. They take Jesus to a place called Golgotha, a hill called the Skull, and there they crucify him. And we're not given any great details about the crucifixion itself beyond the fact that they crucified him, because it's not necessary, because everybody knew what happened at a crucifixion in the first century, because they had all seen it. What we do get is lots of details about the things that were said whilst Jesus was dying on the cross. And you can follow along with these verses that I'm going to read on the YouVersion Bible app, which is an app you can get for your phone and your tablet. And there's a YouVersion live event for this live stream right now. And I'm going to start by reading from John chapter 19, verse 25, and then some verses that follow. It says this: Near the cross of Jesus stood his mother's sister Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother there and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby, he said to her, "Woman, here is your son," and to the disciple, "Here is your mother." From that time on, his disciple took her into his home. Now, I want you to notice here that there were no other members of his family there. There were none of his brothers, only his mum and his aunt, and they were standing nearby. And once again, we get all this detail about who was there because we are being told by someone who was physically present. The only way that John would know this is if he was there and he's remembering in his mind's eye all these different people. And the disciple that's being talked about here, when Jesus saw his mother there and the disciple whom he loved, that disciple is John. And what Jesus does here is he asks John to take care of his mum. Then we go on to verse 13. We skip on just a little way. When he had received the drink, Jesus said, "It is finished." With that, he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. Jesus dies with these words, "It is finished." These words confirm what we can see throughout Jesus' arrest and his trial and his execution. He is accomplishing what he always intended. He is not a victim, but a servant. This is not a cry of desolation, but an announcement of triumph. It's done. My mission is finished. And then on to verse 33. But when they came to Jesus and found that he was already dead, they did not break his legs. Instead, one of the soldiers pierced Jesus' side with a spear, bringing a sudden flow of blood and water. And these events were taking place around another special Jewish festival. So many of these events that John records for us do that. The next day was to be a special Sabbath, and according to their tradition, no work could be done on that Sabbath, including killing people and burying them. But often people who were crucified took several days to die, but to speed up the process, they broke the legs of those who were being crucified. But when they come to Jesus, they find he is already dead. And these next words that John records are often skipped over, but they are really, really important. says this in verse 35, "The man who saw it has given testimony, and his testimony is true. He knows that he tells the truth, and he testifies so that you also may believe." John is saying, this is me. I'm this man. I was there. I saw it. In other words, he's saying, I'm swearing to you that this is exactly what happened. It's as if John reaches out to us through the ages and grabs each of us by the shoulders and looks into our eyes. And he's saying to us, my testimony is true. And I'm testifying to this. I'm telling you about it because this is so important. And I want you to trust that what I'm telling you is the truth and that you can respond to it like I responded to it by believing. Well, we might respond to John and say, well, that's easy, John. I've got no problem in believing that a man called Jesus was executed by the Romans at the request of the religious leaders. I've got no problem with that. No problem with believing that. And virtually all serious historians have no problem with believing that either. The historical evidence for this is overwhelming. But the story doesn't end there. Jesus' body is taken down by Joseph of Arimathea, and it is anointed with spices and wrapped in linen and put in a new tomb in a garden. And they would have only done that if they'd expected Jesus to stay dead. That's what they did to dead bodies, to keep them from smelling. They would have only have done that anointing and that wrapping if they expected Jesus to stay dead. And we don't know what John and Peter did on that Friday night or on that Saturday, but we can be pretty sure they would have been demoralized, upset, believing that the last 3 years were a waste of their lives. But then we pick up the story on the Sunday, when they were awakened by a bang on the door, and maybe they thought it was the Romans coming for them now. But it wasn't. It was Mary. Listen to these words from John chapter 20. "Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the entrance. It's dark, so she can't see inside. She doesn't know what to do, so she runs to tell some of the others who have been with Jesus." Verse 2, "So she came running to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one Jesus loved, that's John, and said, 'They've taken the Lord out of the tomb and we don't know where they've put him.'" She assumes that someone must have taken the body. She assumes what anyone would have assumed. Not that it was a miracle or a resurrection, but that somebody's stolen the body. And it's the details in this that make me so sure that those who wrote down these stories are telling the truth, because it doesn't make them look good. They aren't the heroes because they still don't believe what Jesus has been telling them for 3 years. They're not the heroes of the story. And then we read on, verses 3 and 4. "So Peter and the other disciple started for the tomb. Both were running, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first." By the way, I love this detail here. John is writing this, and he just wants us to know he was the faster runner. He beat Jesus to the tomb. He was the one who got there first. I don't know why we get that detail, but other than John saying, look, I ran fast, I beat Peter. But what happens next doesn't look so good for John. He, that is John, bent over and looked in at the strips of linen lying there, but did not go in. Then Simon Peter came along behind him and went straight into the tomb. Of course he did. Of course Peter flew straight in. He might have run slower, but he was straight in because that was Peter. He just flew straight in. And look what he saw. He saw the strips of linen lying there, as well as the cloth that had been wrapped around Jesus' head. The cloth was still lying in its place, separate from the linen. Finally, the other disciple who had reached the tomb first also went inside. They started to realize that their world might have changed. Because you see, the cloth and the linen were still there. It wasn't a mess. And nobody who steals a body would have taken the time to take off the cloths and to organize them and leave them in a tidy way. Nobody who stole a body would have done that. And slowly it dawns on them. And we are told, he saw and believed. And John and Peter and the others would eventually see and meet Jesus risen from the dead. They'd have conversations, and many of them are recorded for us. But I want to look at one of those conversations they have with Jesus in particular. And another of Jesus' followers was a guy called Thomas. But he wasn't with the other disciples when the resurrected Jesus came to meet them. So he wanted evidence. He didn't believe it. This was so mind-blowing, so beyond his understanding that he wouldn't believe it. And he said, unless I see and feel the wounds, I won't believe it. But Jesus comes and meets with him and says this in verse 27 of chapter 20. Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here, see my hands. Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe." The literal translation, this was written in Greek, the literal translation into English of what John writes here and of these last words would have been, "Thomas, do not be unbelieving, but believing." I love that. Don't be unbelieving, but believing. And Thomas responds, "Then Thomas said to him, 'My Lord and my God.'" He has seen and he believes. But then what happens next is like Jesus taking a moment and leaving his immediate context and leaving the present and pushing into the future and reaching out through the ages to all of those who would come, the generations that would follow on, including you and me. And he speaks with all of us in mind, with you and me in mind, when he says these words. Then Jesus told him, because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and have believed. Blessed, Jesus says, are those that come after you. Blessed are those people I have in mind right now in the future. Blessed are the people that you tell. Blessed are the people who read your accounts. And blessed are the people who believe. And then John finishes his account of the crucifixion and the resurrection with words that we've looked at over and over again in this series in verses 30 and 31. John says this, "Jesus performed many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not recorded in this book. But these are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name." John says, "I've written these down because I want you to see what I saw. I want you to know. I want your eyes to be opened. I want you to know what it took to convince me that Jesus was who he said he was." And John would say, it took the resurrection to convince me. And if you're convinced about that too, if you believe, then you too can find life. Life that comes from forgiveness of sins, knowing that there is a purpose beyond what you're currently experiencing, that there can be a light in the dark times, a hope that there is more, a God who walks with you and beside you, and an eternal destiny with your heavenly Father waiting for you. Friends, wherever you are, scattered all over Andover, all over the UK, and all over the world, we're invited to believe. And believing can change everything. One of the things we love around here at Andover Baptist Church is to tell stories about how Jesus has changed lives. And often we do that through something called baptism, and we baptize people in a full pool that's under here, actually. And we baptize people by fully immersing them, by dunking them head to toe in water as a symbol of the new life that they received. And we were due to be doing baptisms today on this Easter Sunday, and of course we can't now. But we want to share with you one of the stories from somebody who was baptized, dunked here, called Esther. Listen to her story.
Hi, I'm Esther, and aside from a small group of humans, my best friends actually have 4 legs. Vinny and Gladys mean so much to me, and we've been through a lot together. I'm one of 3 siblings. I have a brother and a sister, and I was brought up in a Christian home. I went to church every Sunday and attended a couple of Christian camping holidays, but never could get off the fence about my faith. I'd even go so far as to say I considered myself an atheist for a while. I officially became a Christian in October 2016. The Holy Spirit reached out to me on a Sunday morning in my dad's church in Cornwall during a difficult time for all of my family. It wasn't an overwhelming sensation because as an anxious person, I think I would have freaked out if I'd have felt anything other than my own physiological free will guiding me. There was no bright light, no orchestral music, no voice of God calling out at me. The pastor at my dad's church asked people to raise their hand towards the end of one of the services I attended if they wanted to understand more about a relationship with God. Without feeling it, my hand rose, knowing that's exactly what I wanted. However much I wanted to attribute it to science and logic, I knew it was more than that. I've made some terrible choices in life. Despite knowing the difference between right and wrong, I still chose the wrong path. But those decisions all led me back in the right direction, allowing real beauty to come from some difficult times. Having felt lost for a long time, finding my purpose and believing in the difference I can make in my lifetime has changed me for the better. Even during the darkest times, I have seen that the Lord has a plan for me. All the tough experiences have taught me a lot, and I hope that I can use what I've learned to make a positive difference to others' lives. ABC talks about exploring faith and next steps on your journey, and that's just what I've done, with a lot more to do. I landed in Andover about 2 years ago, having moved around a lot. My faith has grown tenfold thanks to being part of the ABC community, and with a lot of help from some friends who have supported me so very much on that journey. Jesus gave his life for me, knowing the sins I've committed and those I will inevitably commit in the future. I aim to be a better person, and for that I thank the Lord, and I continue to pray for his guidance. I'm really excited for what's to come next, but for right now, it's time to get dunked. I'm Esther Summers, and my faith in Jesus has changed everything.
We started earlier with that question, who is Jesus? Esther and many of us believe that Jesus was more than just a man, way more than a rabbi and a teacher who upset religious people and so was killed, way more than a rebel who stood for something different and who was executed. And believing that Jesus was way more than those things has changed our lives and continues to do so. And we believe those things not on the basis of unsubstantiated rumors or of blind faith or of unfounded hope. We believe that he was and is the Son of God. He is who he said he is because he rose from the dead. And we believe that Jesus rose from the dead because a first century follower of Jesus named Matthew documented the life of Jesus and documented the resurrection. We believe because a Greek named Mark, who was a friend of Peter, the Peter who ran straight into the tomb on that first Easter morning, got Peter's story out of him and wrote it down. We believe because that same Peter wrote letters declaring that he had seen Jesus risen from the dead. We believe because a doctor named Luke traveled around the world and met so many people who had seen and met the risen Jesus that he wrote down their stories. We believe because James, the brother of Jesus, who was so skeptical that he didn't even turn up to his brother's crucifixion, had a change of heart and concluded that his brother was the Son of God and his Lord. James didn't believe whilst Jesus was doing his ministry and his miracles and all that teaching. But later he showed up as a leader of a church in Jerusalem, and ultimately he was stoned to death because he wouldn't renounce his firm belief that his brother was his Messiah, his saving one, because he had risen from the dead. Think about this for a moment. What would your brother have to do to convince you that he was the Son of God? Probably rise from the dead. And we believe because John was there, the bystander who wrote the eyewitness account so we could see in our mind's eye what he had seen with his own eyes, and that by believing we could find life. And those people, they aren't the heroes of the story because they want us to know that they took some convincing. They weren't standing outside the tomb on that first Easter morning waiting for Jesus to come back to life. They didn't believe he'd be resurrected. They thought they'd been fooled. They thought they'd wasted those 3 years of their lives. They thought he was dead, that it was over, that there was no coming back, that he wasn't going to rescue them. He must have lied. John didn't expect a crucifixion, and he certainly didn't expect a resurrection. But he saw and believed and found life. And today we're invited to believe, to take a next step in this journey of faith, to believe and to find life. And if you would already say you're a follower of Jesus, can I invite you today to reaffirm your belief, particularly in this season where things are so uncertain? Maybe to reach out again to the resurrected Jesus who, as you believe in him, will give you life, even in dark and difficult times. And if you would say that you've not been a Jesus follower, you've not taken that step, can I invite you today to take that step with us? That maybe today would be the day when you would reach out to him. I'm going to pray, and I'd love to invite you all to join me in a prayer that expresses our belief in the resurrected Jesus. Let's pray. God, I want to thank you that you love me. I thank you that you want me to experience fullness of life. Thank you that to show me how much you love me, you sent your Son Jesus to earth. Today I want to respond to your invitation to believe in the resurrected Jesus and to take that step. Amen. If you prayed that prayer for the first time today, can I invite you to head to our website, to the Contact Us section, and to send us your details, just a name and an email. We promise we won't bombard you with stuff, but we would love to just be in touch with you and to help you begin your life with Jesus. Or direct message us on social media, or email us at live@andoverbaptist.org.uk, live@andoverbaptist.org.uk, and let us know that you've taken that step today, because we would love to help you as you begin your journey following Jesus. And if you are already a Jesus follower, we'd love to invite you to check out the Next Steps part of our website for how you can take next steps on your journey of faith no matter where you are. You know, we are invited on this Easter Sunday to believe in the resurrected Jesus. In these strange and unusual times, wherever we are, wherever we're watching, in our living rooms, our bedrooms, our kitchens, our studies, wherever it is, we are invited to believe in the resurrected Jesus, to respond to that question, who is Jesus, with the answer, the risen Son of God. And as we do so, we will find life.